Nobody in that arena expected to hear those words that night. Not after what almost happened. Not after the sport nearly witnessed one of the biggest upsets in heavyweight history, live, in real time, in front of millions. This is the story of how it happened. 7 months earlier, Anthony Joshua was not thinking about boxing. He was thinking about two of his closest friends, Sina Gami and Latif Lats Ayodele, killed in a car crash in Nigeria, that Joshua himself survived as a passenger. For a two-time former heavyweight champion who had built his entire identity around strength, invincibility, and control inside the ring, this was a different kind of pain, the kind that no amount of punching power could fix. When Joshua finally agreed to return to the ring, it wasn't framed as just another fight. It was framed as exactly what it was, a comeback from tragedy. The bout was even named for it. The Comeback, July 25, 2026. Jeddah Superdome, Saudi Arabia, and standing across from him was a man almost nobody outside hardcore boxing circles had ever heard of. His name was Kristian Prenga, an Albanian heavyweight, 20 of his 20 career wins coming by knockout. Before he ever set foot in a professional ring, Prenga was driving a truck at 8 years old, helping his father work in the mountains of Orash, Albania, in one of the most rural, unforgiving corners of Europe. He only discovered boxing after walking into a gym trying to lose weight. Nobody groomed him for greatness. Nobody predicted he would ever share a ring with a former unified world champion. But Prenga had one gift that made him dangerous, regardless of his record or his resume. His right hand carried genuine, fight-ending power. He had already proven it on smaller stages. Against American gatekeeper Joey DeWaco, Prenga forced a stoppage in the 5th round. Against Juan Torres in Philadelphia, he dropped his opponent 3 times in the 1st round alone, and twice more in the 2nd before the referee finally intervened. These weren't Murderer's Row names, but they were enough to show that Prenga wasn't just another opponent brought in to lose on schedule. He was a live puncher with 20 knockouts on his record, and boxing history is littered with warnings about live punchers who get overlooked. The build-up to the fight barely acknowledged him as a threat. This was supposed to be Joshua's routine final tune-up before the fight the entire boxing world had been waiting over a decade for. A blockbuster showdown against fellow Brit Tyson Fury, already scheduled for later in the year. Fury himself had just handled his own tune-up a day earlier in Thailand, stopping veteran Marius Wach in the 7th round with relative ease. The stage was set. 2 former champions, 2 routine final tests, and then, finally, the fight British boxing fans had been begging for. Prenga was simply the name standing between Joshua and that super fight. A formality. A name fans would forget by the time the Fury fight rolled around. Nobody told Kristian Prenga that. From the opening bell, the entire arena expected Joshua to do what he had done to so many overmatched opponents before. Establish his jab, control range, and grind his way toward a routine victory. Instead, within 19 seconds of the 1st round, Prenga landed a short, vicious right uppercut that caught Joshua clean on the chin. Joshua went down.
Joshua, you got to keep those hands nice and high.
Big right hand! Joshua in it! He's got problems here in the opening minute and a half! And Kristian Prenga!
The Jeddah Superdome went silent, then erupted into stunned noise, the kind of collective gasp that only happens when the boxing world witnesses something it genuinely did not see coming. Joshua beat the count and rose to his feet, but his legs told a different story than his face. He looked unsteady, disoriented, hunting for anything to hold on to as Prenga, sensing the opportunity of his career, closed in for the finish. Prenga didn't let up. He continued landing hard right hands, backing Joshua toward the ropes, hurting him again and again as the former champion desperately tried to survive, using whatever experience and instinct he had left. At one point, Joshua was pushed down to the canvas a 2nd time before the bell, his legs completely gone, absorbing punishment from a fighter that almost nobody in the building had taken seriously 20 minutes earlier. By the end of the 1st round, scorekeepers watching live had the round 10-7 in Prenga's favor, an almost unthinkable margin against a former 2-time unified heavyweight champion. Ringside commentators struggled to find the right words. This wasn't supposed to happen. Prenga, the unknown Albanian with no signature wins on his resume, had Anthony Joshua on the verge of one of the greatest upsets in modern heavyweight history. In Joshua's corner between rounds, the tension was unmistakable. Joshua sat on his stool, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened to him in front of a global pay-per-view audience. Every person in that arena, and millions more watching around the world, were asking the same question. Was this the night Anthony Joshua's comeback ended before it had even properly begun? The second round began, and the entire complexion of the fight had shifted. Nobody knew which version of Anthony Joshua would emerge, the shaken, hurt fighter from round one, or the two-time world champion capable of ending fights with a single shot when everything aligned. Joshua came out measured. He re-established his jab, controlling distance the way he had failed to in the opening round. About 20 seconds in, he landed a clean 1-2 combination down the middle that visibly buckled Prenga for the first time in the fight. Joshua followed immediately, with a hard right hand, then another, backing the Albanian toward the ropes.
Has won in 2 dramatic rounds. Kristian Prenga is knocked out, having got a couple of knockdowns himself.
Prenga, who moments earlier had Joshua on the brink of the biggest win of his life, was now the one in trouble. Joshua unloaded a combination that ended with a devastating right hook, sending Prenga crashing backward through the middle ropes and out of the ring itself. The referee began the count. Prenga tried to climb back to his feet, made it partway up, then collapsed back to his knees. The fight was immediately waved off. Official time, 2 minutes and 43 seconds into round 2. Anthony Joshua, who moments earlier looked like he might suffer the most shocking loss of his career, had somehow turned complete chaos into a dramatic knockout victory. At ringside, cameras caught the reigning unified heavyweight king Oleksandr Usyk watching the sequence with visible shock on his face, a small but telling detail of just how unexpected the entire fight had become. Usyk, a fighter who had already given up several of his own titles earlier that year without ever losing them in the ring, understood better than almost anyone how quickly the landscape of heavyweight boxing could shift in a single night. What he was watching from ringside was a reminder that even the sport's most secure names are never more than one clean punch away from chaos. When it was finally over, Joshua didn't celebrate the way he usually did. He didn't posture or perform for the cameras. Standing in the middle of the ring that had almost seen him suffer one of the greatest upsets in heavyweight history, he addressed the moment with raw honesty. "It's more than punch power," he said, fighting back visible emotion. "That was spirit. That was lats. That was Cena. It hurts even talking about it. They are my brothers." The win kept alive boxing's long-awaited dream matchup, an all-British super fight against Tyson Fury. Contracts, according to Hearn, were already signed for a fight later in the year, with a venue still to be confirmed. Fans immediately began debating whether the shaky first round exposed something real about Joshua's chin and reflexes at this stage of his career, concerns that would inevitably follow him into a fight against a much more dangerous and much more experienced opponent in Fury. But the story of that night in Jeddah was never really about Fury. It was about a nearly unknown heavyweight from a small mountain town in Albania who, for one violent round, made the entire boxing world believe the impossible was about to happen. Kristian Prenga did not get a fairy tale ending. He did not walk away as heavyweight champion of the world. His record dropped to 20 wins and 2 losses, and he returned home to Albania having come closer than anyone could have predicted to the single biggest upset in recent heavyweight memory, only to fall agonizingly short in the very next round. But he walked away with something almost as valuable in a sport built on reputation and spectacle, proof undeniable and broadcast to millions that on any given night, with one clean punch, absolutely anyone can put the story of boxing's biggest names in jeopardy. Before that fight, Prenga was a name known mostly in regional American club circuits and among hardcore fans who followed European heavyweight prospects closely. After it, his name appeared in headlines across the entire boxing world, mentioned in the same sentence as Anthony Joshua, discussed on major broadcasts, analyzed frame by commentators trying to explain how a virtual unknown had come so close to derailing one of the sport's biggest remaining superfights. For 19 seconds, and then for nearly an entire round after that, nobody outside of Kristian Prenga's own camp believed what they were watching was real. And for those few minutes, in a superdome built for spectacle in the Saudi desert, an unknown Albanian truck driver turned heavyweight puncher had the entire boxing world convinced they were about to witness the end of Anthony Joshua's comeback before it had even truly begun. The fight also revealed something important about Joshua himself, something that went beyond the final knockout. For years, critics had questioned whether Joshua's chin and composure could hold up under real adversity, pointing to previous knockout losses earlier in his career as evidence of a fighter who could be rattled. That first round against Prenga seemed to confirm every one of those doubts in real time. But the second round told a different story, one of a fighter who, even after being dropped and nearly finished, could reset, adjust, and respond with precisely the kind of composed violence that had made him a two-time world champion in the first place. That duality, the vulnerability and the resilience existing within the same 3-minute round, is exactly why this fight will be remembered, long after the eventual Fury superfight is decided. It wasn't a clean, dominant performance that reaffirmed Joshua's status at the top of the division. It was something messier and, in many ways, more human, a fighter who had just survived unimaginable personal tragedy, walking into the ring and nearly losing everything to a fighter nobody had prepared for, before finding, somewhere within himself, the exact response needed to survive. And that is exactly why, decades from now, the name Kristian Prenga will still come up whenever people talk about the night nobody saw coming, and why Anthony Joshua's own words in that ring, about spirit, about brothers, about carrying the people he lost into every fight going forward, will remain far more memorable than the knockout that ended it.